And so singers had to learn the art and craft of projecting the voice beyond the stage, past the orchestra and into the theatre. They had to learn to do it in a way that they could sing day, afternoon and evening, maybe 1 or 2 operas a day, every day, 7 days a week, for as long as the season of the opera continued. These singers had to learn this art and craft of keeping their throat open, because if there was pressure in the larynx, the first thing that falls apart is your larynx. Signs of an aging larynx, or a larynx that's starting to fall apart, is when you sort of get all kinds of shakes in the voice. Oh, you get the tremolos and the yeah. So if you're hearing a voice shaking and trembling and it's getting huskier over time, if you see a singer little by little just worsening, that's because they've had a lot of pressure in there. So the singers of the 19th century, I have to say, were the greatest singers, and also the turn of the 20th century, anywhere up to the Second World War. We're talking about singers who spoke their singing, didn't try to sound like opera singers, but they actually used their speech, because in the Italian tradition, you open your mouth, you say the word clearly. Notice that the masters of the former 19th century would continue to teach the students to say the word. So the Italian tradition is say the word clearly. It was not about produce the voice and we'll worry about the word later. So it's through the word that we get the voice to open up. So if we sing, I'll pick a song that everyone can relate to, both men and women, Over the Rainbow, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, made famous by Judy Garland. If I'm singing through the word, if I'm opening my mouth and saying the word clearly, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. So I'm using the word to open up my voice. If I'm doing what modern singing does, especially in the classic world more than any other sort of genre or style, people are more concerned about the voice than the word. And then you start to get somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Okay, so you hear singers inventing sounds that really doesn't really relate to their speaking voice. The thing about open natural singing is that we're not moving away from our speaking. If anything, we're using our speaking to open up the resonances and vibrations through the body and then magnify it through the word, the tone. To give an example, I'll sing something classical. Ma non me la sa, non darme sto dormiendo, torna sorriendo, fammi gamba. Okay, so I'm opening my mouth, I'm going for the consonants, I'm going for the vowels, and I'm attacking each syllable, landing on the vowel as smoothly without punching it. Now, on the topic of whether a voice sounds, why a voice sounds poppy and a voice sounds classical, which is something that teachers somehow make their students believe and categorize them in that way. I've mentioned things about the way you stylistically sing a melody or deliver it. I've mentioned accents, it depends where you come from, and the kind of swing and groove you have in the way you talk, and then you sing it in the same way. But there's also one other thing that I forgot to mention in the previous video takes, and that is that pop singers tend to rely, ever since the microphone came into being, I'm not talking about the gramophone, because the gramophone was still allowing singers to magnify and resonate with their entire physical effort to produce an open throat tone, which then unfortunately got gobbled up by the horn and turned into this little tinny voice. So whenever you're listening to recordings on the gramophones, you have to consider these voices were massive and grand in big theatres. They could be heard everywhere in a theatre. Even the lightest sort of tenor or soprano could travel past an orchestra and be heard. The words were clear, the tones travelled. They had beautiful sounds, okay? And all through an effortless production which allowed them to sing every day of the week. Enrico Caruso, who was one of the archetype greatest tenors in the history of open natural singing and opera, which was his genre or style of music that he chose to sing. When he started out in the first 4 years in Egypt, from what I've read in the reported texts of his life, he was singing 2 grand operas a day, matinee and evening, 7 days a week for 4 years. Now, grand opera arias are not like little jazz tunes where it hangs around mainly around your speaking range and might venture a slight bit above it, but not too far. We're talking about grand opera where you have to sing out and project, you have to be heard, you have to get past the massive orchestra. In some of the grand opera sort of orchestras are very large, and there's a lot of instrumental noises and sounds, so you have to be able to project past that. His words are still clear. You hear him on gramophone, you can make out his words, you can even write the text down of what he's saying. If you understand the language, I do. I understand Italian, I understand French, so when I listen I can clearly and audibly understand. Whereas I listen to modern recording artists, and half of them that are all throaty, I can't even understand what they're saying. Apparently in some cases some were singing in English and I couldn't tell. So that's the difference between those singers in our times. So these singers were basically singing in anywhere up to 1.5 octaves to 2 octave range, both sopranos and tenors or whatever, and they could produce a sound without any amplification help of any electronic kind of systems to help them get through all that singing, and very currently at the time singing all the time. Obviously, Caruso suggests when you're not singing to keep your mouth quiet. Any movement of the vocal cords is tiring, especially you're performing a lot. So you're meant to spend a lot of time in silence, try and go to the movies, read a book, go for walks. Try not to use your voice when you're not singing. It helps to preserve the voice for the next performance. The difference between a pop voice and a classical voice is that pop voices in our times, or ever since the microphone came into existence, which was around 1925, and the first recordings were attempted on the voice of Beniamino Gigli, who was one of the greatest tenors that took over at the Met after Caruso fell ill. Now these electronic recordings were the first recordings experimented in 1925, and you can see them on YouTube. Once the microphone came into being, it sort of, over time, made the singer relax a little. And so, because the microphone helped to amplify the voice, singers didn't have to work as hard to get to think about projecting. They just had to pronounce the word and sing the tune. This is where I think a lot of natural ability in the artists prior to the advent of the microphone, who were great singers who really did it the way it was meant to, as opposed to the post period of the advent of the microphone era. People start to close up their mouths, because it happens if you try a modern microphone these days. If you sing a little bit too loud in the mic and the sound engineer is not quick enough to adjust the microphone level, the microphone will whistle. So a singer, what they do is they start to hold back their tone. So when you start to hold back your tone, you are, if you're not using a correct support deep support system, you're going to get your throat all knotting up and tensing up because it wants to release and run like water. It doesn't want to be held back. Okay, so when you're holding back, we tend to close up our mouth more. And when we close up our mouth in order to reduce the volume so it doesn't distort the mic, we get into a wrong habit of holding back on throat muscles and body muscles, and then the body starts to get all tightened up. So I attribute a lot of the problems, I'm not going to say that the cause is the microphone, but a lot of the problems to faulty techniques are the usage of electronic microphone systems and sound systems. Often we can venture into studio recording places and there are a lot of inexperienced sound engineers giving advice to singers. Singers start to believe that they think that they know what they're talking about because sound engineers want to hear a certain thing that they hear in their head, and a singer starts to manipulate their throat and their voice to suit what the sound engineer wants, and then in the end the singer doesn't realise, but over a short period of time they're actually losing control and balance of their delivery of their voice, and even problems can arise from just having those kind of encounters and experiences with the wrong people giving wrong advice. The pop voice, as I'm trying to understand what teachers of today are saying, basically to me is really a cut-off production of sound. Because pop singers using microphones hold back their tone. What do? To close up their mouth. And to give an example, I'll sing a song that will sound poppy with a poppy voice, and then I'll give an example of a full open tone on that same song to give you the difference, to show you that there is a full production of vibration resonance and a narrowed and delimited production of the same voice and resonance, but the resonance acutely shortened and reduced to sound less impressive, or let's say, as teachers say, operatic. So if I'm doing a song like I Burn For You, which is sung by John Farnham, most pop singers will sing it like this. I burn for you, what am I gonna do? I burn for you, burn for you. Okay, so that's singing it with the pop sound. I don't say that's a pop sound, I call that a faulty sound. I call that a sound that is not complete in its tone. It's a reduced sound. It's still coming off my bones. Don't judge me for my voice, because I do suffer reflux, as I've reflux to the larynx, and I'm not even meant to sing. I'm not even meant to sing to you, but I'm trying to do the best that I can on a condition which a singer's not even meant to sing on. But that is a cut-off tone, which is using very minimal resonance in the bones of our body, okay? But if I sing it a little bit more complete, my tone, I burn for you, what am I gonna do? I burn for you, burn for you. Okay, that's a big difference. And I haven't done anything to my throat. I haven't manipulated muscles in my throat to thicken the sound. I have just increased a little bit more energy in my production, and I've opened my mouth a lot more, because when we close our mouth, our tone shrinks and it thins out. I burn for you, I burn for you. Okay, which is a more mezza voce, which in Italian means half voice production. Okay, so we're just cutting down the resonance or the tone, magnitude of the tone, to produce a more finer sounding tone. So if that's what teachers are saying, that one is poppy and one is classical, well, I don't think that my voice ever completely change. It was the same voice. It was still related to my how are you voice, my speaking voice. I just shrunk it or I expanded it. And opera, when you're singing about microphones in an opera theatre, you have to sing out in the fullest of your open throat production in order to travel past the orchestra, because there's no microphones, so you don't have any fears of distorting sound systems and all the rest, so you can let go. So, whereas if I'm doing it in a pop voice, okay, I've just cut off all the resonance, I've held back my tone, and now it sounds a little bit more poppy, as a teacher would say today, poppy, which I disagree with.